Hello everybody and welcome back to the next move. Today we're going to continue on with our development instructor course, lesson 2. The topic for the day is tactics. So what I'm going to show you is the three most common tactics that you get in chess. But first, before I do that, let's just explain what is a tactic. A tactic is just a move or a sequence of moves that help you win material. The point is you just want to get more points because obviously then you have bigger pieces, it should be easier to win. So any tactic that gains material for you is great. Okay, so where we're going to start is we're going to start with forks. The first and most important thing that you need to know about a fork is that you attack two pieces with one piece. Usually the king is involved, but it doesn't have to be. Okay, another thing about a fork that you need to know is that every single piece on the board can do it. Okay, it's one of the very few tactics that every piece can do. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you an example of every piece doing a fork. So if you look at the position, it's white to play. If white were to play his pawn to e4, then he would be attacking the king and the rook. And let's say the king moves, we take it, he takes, and hopefully you should be able to get your pawn to the other side of the board and get a queen. Excellent. The next position, I'll show you what a knight can do. If the knight were to play to e4, the knight would be attacking the king and the rook, and even if the king moves, we'll just take the rook for free. In this case, we win the rook for 5 points, and we don't lose anything. Next example is the bishop. So here, if we move the bishop to f6, we would just be attacking the king and the rook, and after the king moves, we would take the rook, and of course, hopefully we can just go ahead and win with that extra pawn of ours. Next up is the rook. So this one's a little bit more interesting, just to show you the material difference. Here we can attack the king and the queen, and even if the queen takes us, we take his queen and end up winning 9 points and only losing 5. So we get a difference of 4. So now of course we should be able to win with the rook. If you don't know, don't worry, we're going to get to little checkmates, basic checkmate patterns later on as well. Here we can see how the queen can do the job. Queen e4, check. And we attack the king and the rook, and after whatever move black plays, we can just take the rook. So let's say he plays g6, we just take the rook for free. So we win 5 points. So from being equal in the position, a normal typical position, we end up winning a rook for free just because of a simple fork. Now last position of different pieces is the king. If you have a quick look at the material difference here, white has 2 pawns for a bishop. But after the move king b5, we attack actually 3 pieces, and the knight and bishop cannot move, unfortunately, to save themselves. Okay, so one of them will have to croak. Next up on our list is just to show you a little bit of a mixy board. Show you that if it was white to play, white could play here, which would then attack the king and the rook. If it was black to play, black could play here, which would attack the king and the rook. Sorry, I meant queen before. So just to show you that there can be tactics all over the show. Okay. Next up, I just want to show you one little peculiarity when the king is not involved. Okay. The reason why tactics, forks especially, and pins and skewers, if the king is not involved, there are certain ways to get out of it. So here, if we look quickly, we can figure out, hey, great, we're attacking 2 rooks. So we should win one of them. But unfortunately here, black has a sneaky little bailout where he can just attack your king with 1 rook, and after you move, he could move his rook now, and obviously both of them have been saved. So sometimes they can get out of it if the king is not involved. But of course, if you check the king, then usually the king has to move. Okay. Next up, we have the pin. Now, just before we do this pin, obviously you can probably spot the pin very easily here. It's a very simple example. But one thing you need to know about a pin is that there's 2 different types of pins. There are absolute pins and relative pins. An absolute pin means that you're absolutely not allowed to move. It would be illegal, which means that you're pinning a piece to a king. A relative pin, on the other hand, would have had a queen here instead of a rook, which means you could move the rook if you wanted to. You're allowed at least. Okay, so again, we can quickly pop in here and just see that after this move, we pin the rook to the king, the rook can't move anywhere, it's not allowed to, and after the king moves, we can just take the rook. So we win 5 points. In our next example, we're going to show you a relative pin. So here, if you want to take a quick second to see if you can find the pin here, okay, It's white to play. If white played bishop f3, then he would be pinning the knight to the rook. Now this is a relative pin. In other words, the knight could move if it wants to. Obviously, in this case, if it does, it would just lose the whole rook. So it probably won't. And if it doesn't move, then of course we're just going to take it, because the rook cannot move to defend the knight. Okay, but now let's change this position real quickly. Let's just change the position of the king. So here, if we play bishop f3 now, thinking that, we have this nice little relative pin, the big problem is that this knight can get out. And after we move our king, he can move his rook. We can do the same, obviously the other way around. Here he can counter fork, so he can fork us now. And of course now we have to move our king, and afterwards he can just take the bishop. Okay, so if it's a relative pin, there are ways to get out, just like with the fort that we had where we tried to fork the two rooks and the one rook could check you. Okay, we can also just show how the back piece can get out of this. Change this position slightly. If we put the king on d2, here again we think that we have this nice little relative pin here, but the rook can unfortunately move to attack your king, and afterwards he can move his knight. Okay, now for the next phase of pins, you also need to just have a careful look at how many points you're going to win out of your pin. Okay, material. So if we again fork here, pin here, then we can see that we obviously are pinning the rook, so the rook we are going to win. But if he plays here, if we take it now, then we only win 5 points and we lose 3, because we lose the bishop as well. And funny enough, in this position you're going to end up drawing this because of certain endgame rules, which we'll get to as well. So instead of taking the rook immediately, what you can do is you can try and apply more pressure, because if you have more attackers than defenders, then you will win the piece for free. So in this case we would play c4, and after that the king moves wherever, we can just take it, and now we've won it for free. We didn't lose anything out of this deal. Show you another example. So here, obviously, pinning the knight to the king, he could defend it with a pawn. Now again, if we take, we don't win anything actually. Well, we probably will end up winning the game, but that's not the point. Point is we don't win any material. Okay, this will be just as easy. And of course, now the knight still can't move. And now after, let's say, plays here, we take, he takes, we take, and we end up winning a whole knight instead of nothing. So for our next tactic is called a skewer. A skewer is a lot like a pin, except instead of attacking the smaller piece and pinning it to the bigger piece, here we attack the bigger piece, and when it moves out of the way, we take the smaller one. So exact same position as before, except now we're attacking the king first, and when the king moves, we take the rook. Instead of a pin where we would have attacked the rook and it can't move and then would be taken. So now the king would move and we would take it. So this is the difference between a skewer. Okay, let's look at another one here quickly. This is obviously now again a skewer that does not involve the king. Okay, so here you can see we are attacking the bigger piece first. Okay, and if it moves, he'll lose the smaller one in the back. Okay, now what happens though if we change the position of our king once again? It's very important to note that if you were to play here, skewering the rook and the bishop, he could counter. He could play rook f6, which would then pin your bishop to your king, which means now you can't take his bishop anymore. So there are ways to get out of those as well. So don't always just give up quickly immediately. You'll be very impressed to see that a lot of times you can get out of things as well. In this position, I just wanted to show that if we attack a piece, so like this, and the piece behind it is of the same value, okay, so like two rooks here, it's still a skewer. A pin is only applicable when the piece in the front is smaller than the piece in the back. Okay, so this would still be a skewer. Okay, for our last little puzzle here, it's a little bit more of a tricky one. It's black to play here. See if you can find the skewer. It's a skewer, okay? A lot of you are going to first instincts, if you're black, you're going to want to play here. Okay, this would be a fork, and this would be a good move, except there's a bailout. Okay, first of all, the king is not involved, which means that we can move any of those two pieces. So luckily for white here, white could have played here check then, and afterwards he could move his bishop. Actually, if you don't do this properly, you're going to end up losing material yourself. Now he ends up pinning you. Oops. So that didn't work out so well. Okay, and even if you were to, let's say, block with the rook, then he could take here, and now he's won a pawn himself, and he's gotten out of the fork. Okay, there is a different option here, though. It is the same two pieces that are involved in this, but we don't use that rook, we use this one. So by playing here, we are skewering the queen and the bishop. Now, this queen has nowhere to go to defend the bishop. So, and obviously you don't want to lose your queen. So after the queen moves, you'll just take the bishop. And that's it. That is just the first 3 tactics for you, the most common, the most easy ones to find. Now that you know the name and you know the definition, you know what it looks like, it hopefully will be easier for you to go and find these tactics in puzzles, in your games, etc. This is why it's very important for you to learn tactics, because Tull himself said that 99% of chess is tactics. Okay. But what I find funny, though, is that people always tell you to go and do tactics, but if you don't know what you're looking for, then it could be quite a big waste as well. So I'm hoping with these videos, with the tactics and stuff that I show you, that you'll know more about what you're looking for. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please add me on chess.com as Loner Druid, or follow me on Twitter. Otherwise, also please subscribe to my channel, and hopefully I'll get out the next lesson, which we will start with opening principles. I'm going to add on to that a little bit. The usual opening principles that everybody applies, we're going to add a couple of extras. Thank you very much, guys, and I'll see you